These are the first set of satellite images of the PLA destroying its bunkers and military structures as it pulls back from the LAC against the Indian military. As Prime Minister Modi returns from the BRICS summit, this visit marks his biggest geopolitical victory in 10 years, which concluded with a bilateral meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Details are emerging how the Chinese PLA has been completely cornered to completely vacate its positions at Depsang Plains and Demchok, the final two friction points that remained at the LAC in Ladakh since the 2020 Galwan Valley clashes. Of course, CCP mouthpiece like the Global Times has been trying to spin this narrative as a diplomatic win for China, but that is far from the case, as we will evaluate shortly. The main concern for India has been Depsang Plains up north, just 30 kilometers away from and in the southeast of the final strategic checkpost at Daulat Beg Oldi, near the formidable Karakoram Pass and Siachen Glacier. Now here, the Chinese troops had occupied previously neutral territory since 2020 and blocked access for Indian troops to several patrolling points, PP 10, 11, 12 and PP 13 along the LAC. However, this report in the print elaborates how Chinese PLA has now been forced to retreat from neutral territory, and Indian troops will once again be able to patrol right up to their perception of the LAC, as was the case before 2020. Not just that, Chinese frontline troops have been informed by their high command to dismantle any defensive structures that they built since 2020, and this includes tents as well as bunkers. Now this is a clear indication that the Chinese CCP was eager to reach a border compromise with India after 4 years of bitter military standoff and numerous small clashes. The Indian military and the PLA have also come to an agreement that they would inform each other beforehand, before patrolling, and keep the strength of patrol parties limited up to 15 troops each to avoid any large-scale clashes. According to the MEA, the same has been achieved at Demchok as well, the final friction point, where the Indian military can now patrol up to charging Nalla at India's perceived LAC as they had run before 2020. Now, since 2020, both sides have been negotiating hard. While the PLA sought to establish a new normal at the border and change the status quo by salami slicing, India simply refused to accept any Chinese attempts at such salami slicing. At several other locations, buffer zones had been created, including the Finger region of North Bank of Pangong Lake, Hot Springs or PP15, Gogra or PP17, as well as Galwan Valley or PP14, where the deadly clashes had taken place, which resulted in the death of 20 Indian troops. Now, while China acknowledged the death of 4 soldiers, US intelligence suggested Chinese casualties were more than 30 in hand-to-hand combat with Indian soldiers. Now, those buffer zones would be removed now, and patrolling rights restored for both Indian and Chinese troops up to their perception of the LAC. I'm sure you'd accept that no one gives up an advantageous position on the battlefield against an adversary unless pulling back was the only way out. And this is what PLA has been forced to do. This just shows how the CCP leadership was eager to compromise with India, and there are multiple reasons for the same. Now, this has been achieved after several small skirmishes at the border threatened a larger border conflict and another India-China war. However, skillful diplomacy by the Modi government, led by Foreign Minister Jaishankar and NSA Doval, not only managed to avoid another India-China war, but also forced the CCP and PLA to agree to all of India's demands, which was the restoration of pre-2020 status quo ante. To avoid any further clashes along the LAC, certain confidence-building measures will now continue. A defense source told media, quote, "This will include CEO commander-level meetings on a monthly basis as well as on a case-to-case basis." Now, all this follows 21 rounds of core commander-level talks at the LAC as well as 31 rounds of India-China WMCC meetings, the last of which was held in Beijing last month. So why has China agreed to all of India's demands and decided to dismantle illegal structures and pull back from previously neutral territory? What forced China to do it? Now, there are several reasons, but most important is India's tilt towards the US-led West post-2020 clashes with China. In fact, US satellite-based intelligence data helped the Indian Army predict and successfully repel another Chinese salami slicing attempt near Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh a few months after Galwan. Moreover, within India, This has given rise to intense anti-China sentiment and nationalism. The Modi government banned direct flights and visas from China, while placed any Chinese investments under the strictest scrutiny. None of this impacted India's economic rise, and the country is on the trajectory to become the third biggest economy in the world by 2030. However, things are different in China. It seems to have impacted the Chinese economy's growth, which failed to take off after the pandemic and clashes with India, and Chinese economic slowdown has caused widespread concern. India also capitalized on the China Plus One sentiment and attracted massive FDIs from the West. Face-off with China saw India expand its footprint in the South China Sea region and ASEAN region with mega defense pacts with the Philippines and Vietnam and others. All this showed that India would not be bullied by the PLA like ASEAN nations, and it is in China's interest to ease tensions with India, its biggest geopolitical rival in the Indo-Pacific. However, China hasn't been sitting idle. It has massively boosted its own military infrastructure along the LAC. The PLA bridge over Pangong Lake was accompanied by another Chinese military base with underground bunkers and hardened shelters. China has also set up and enhanced multiple military bases and airfields in Tibet and stationed its J-20 fighter jets in the region. Now, while temporary truce at the LAC has been achieved, the big question remains, can India ever trust China? Leave a comment with your opinion and subscribe to Inconnect News for more Indian defense updates and geopolitics.